There have been countless research done on the impact that culturally conscious and aware teachers have on creating a more positive learning environment for their students, but not much has been done towards investigating its impact on the students with Middle Eastern backgrounds. The experience that students have in school is based on the perception their teachers have on them, and how those teachers interact with their students. This culture has long been misunderstood and misrepresented. In comparison to other immigrant groups, Middle Eastern students face additional challenges as a result of cultural, racial, and religious misunderstanding. Students who belong to this culture have become victims of negative stereotypes, resulting in equally negative experiences in school, affecting their academic achievement. In the aftermath of today's political climate, images have been distorted and biases are no longer left at the door. That's not to say that nothing has been done to address the academic needs of Middle Eastern students from immigrant and refugee families. One of the first issues addressed is the language barrier and acclimating to the school culture. But more has to be done to garner a connection between the unique experiences that these students already have and the new experiences they are creating in American schools. In Hassan Al-Nawad's master's thesis entitled Raising Teachers' Cultural Knowledge of Middle Eastern Students in the Classroom, he states that teachers need to be more culturally aware of the diverse cultures in the classroom to help create a more engaging learning environment. In his study, he began his research by electronically interviewing elementary school teachers about their knowledge and awareness of Middle Eastern cultures. His main categories included data sources, limited knowledge and misconceptions held by these teachers, their interest in learning more about Middle Eastern culture, and how they have communicated with Middle Eastern students. 80% of those teachers from California responded that they currently had Middle Eastern students in their classroom. Al-Nawad then went on to break down the ethnic origins of those particular students, making sure to point out that though all of them were Middle Eastern, their linguistic backgrounds were varied. For instance, Irani students spoke Farsi, Turkish students spoke Turki, and Yemeni students spoke Arabic. Next, Al-Nawad went on to question if any of these teachers had ever visited the Middle East or knew about Middle Eastern culture. Out of the 20 teachers questioned, only one had ever visited the Middle East. And of all 20 teachers, they had limited knowledge about Middle Eastern culture. Thankfully, the teachers in the study demonstrated an interest in wanting to learn more about Middle Eastern culture in order to help their students fit into their learning environment. In this demographics chart reported by the California Department of Education, there wasn't even an option to mark Middle Eastern as an ethnicity. What are these families supposed to do? Back when bubbling in answers on the cat was a thing, I remember having to bubble in answers about my ethnic background. Unsurprisingly, Middle Eastern was not an option. From my own experience, I started by marking white, but then chose Asian later on because Yemen, the country my parents are from, is technically in Asia. It's a sad reality because we're there. We, Arab American students, go to these schools and we're being educated there, but it doesn't feel like we're being seen or acknowledged. Every time I answer one of these questionnaires, my answer is always changing. How can I adequately mark an ethnicity when I'm not even being represented in the options? This has definitely left an impact in my adult life. With the census coming up next year, should I be involved in this civic duty when I most likely won't even be represented in the questionnaire? Of course, I'll still participate, and most likely mark white or Asian if Middle Eastern has not been added. What I've learned through this research is that Middle Eastern students are not being properly represented. As young children, we begin to accept the fact that we're not represented as a social norm, then grow up having those same expectations. It might not seem like a big deal in the moment, but with each child impacted, an entire group of people is being pushed to the sidelines.
My name is Selma and Selma Isa, and I am 7 years old and I'm in second grade, and I go to Patriot Elementary. This is Anina.
Well, nice to meet you, Selma. I noticed when you said your name, you said your last name was Isa, and then you changed it to Isa.
Yeah.
What's your name?
It's Selma Isa, but in English it's Selma Isa.
Is that how you introduce yourself at school?
Yes.
Do you say Selma or Selma?
Selma.
How does it feel when you introduce yourself as Selma?
It feels like it's not too weird, but a bit weird, like 5% weird.
Parties. Do you guys get to talk about Ramadan at school and have Ramadan parties too?
No.
Okay. Do you
I
guys...
told my teacher for like the second day of school we have to skip, cause I had to skip because it was Ramadan Eid.
Yeah, this year we did have Eid really early, back in August.
Yeah.
But what about Ramadan? Have you told your teacher about Ramadan? Does your teacher know about it? You don't think so? Why? Why don't you think your teacher knows about it?
Because he's not Muslim.
Okay. Are there any other Muslim kids at your school? Yeah?
Yeah, there's like a boy in second grade named Mrs. Furtado's class, one of the second grade teachers, and his name is Muhammad.
Okay. Do you think he's gonna celebrate Ramadan?
And Eid.
And Eid? Why?
Because he's Muslim, and he's like 7, 8 years old.
Same age as you.
And he has 2 older sisters that go to. I see them every morning.
They go to the same school?
Yeah.
Okay, so
But the older than him, they're like in I think 5th or 6th grade.
So on my count, there's you, there's Muhammad, the other second grader, his 2 older sisters. So that's 4 Muslim kids at your school. And what's your favorite part about going to school?
Like parties, Christmas parties, and like Easter parties, because we got a lot of stuff on
Christmas and Easter. Those are some very big holidays. Do you have any holidays of your own?
Yes.
Like what?
Eid.
Eid.
And Ramadan.
And Ramadan. What are those?
Ramadan means like you're closer to God, and it's becoming a better Muslim.
What makes you special compared to the other kids in your class?
They're not Muslim and I am.
When I was younger and going through school, I had 2 identities. My identity at home with my family and my identity at school. And for a lot of people, they do have dual identities, but it's not something that is immediate upon entering school. What I remember the most is that my name was always something that I changed day to day between being at home and being at school. So my name is Minwa, and at school, people would call me Minwa. And for as long as I can remember, that's what people have called me. It doesn't seem like that big of a difference, but it really did make an impact on me. I would get it first extremely wrong, and then I would correct them with the Americanized name. So I would tell them it's Minwa. So my correction for it was not even the correct way to say it. It was just the way that I knew people were comfortable with saying it. Well, when you meet someone for the first time, that's the very first thing you learn about someone is their name. And if from the start you learn something that's wrong, then your complete perspective of that person, though you might not know the difference, for them, it's already an act. It's already a lie. It's not something that's you know, their true self.
How different it is.
Well, as a student, my main issue was the name difference. I didn't really get a lot of questions about my ethnicity or my background or my culture until I started wearing the hijab in 4th grade, because that was like immediately it made me different from my peers, and they could see the difference. And then now they had questions about, oh, where's that coming from? Why are you wearing it? What's the purpose behind it? So since then, that's when I started getting accustomed to answering questions about myself, about my faith, and college. I really enjoyed my time at CSUB, but there were a couple instances that made me a little uncomfortable. My freshman year, at the end of the year, I had a poli-sci professor who he had these biases about the Yemeni community, and he had previously only one Yemeni girl student in his class. And her experience, though we both grew up in Bakersfield and we both come from Yemeni families, was completely different from my own. So in her family, they were very conservative, just starting to allow her to go to school and start working, whereas my family is more comfortable with the idea of a woman getting an education and working for herself and providing for herself. But because of these biases that this teacher had previously from another student, he put the same perspective on me. And immediately from day one, he treated me with those perceptions that he already had. And he didn't really ask me about my background, where I come from, what my life was like. He just threw that onto me and made that part of my identity when it really wasn't. Now, as a teacher, I have the opportunity to share my experience with my students and bring to light what Middle Eastern culture is really like, and how my people really are. I think it's really important that we get to teach this to students while they're young, so that they don't start getting accustomed to certain views that aren't necessarily true. So that when they're older and they actually get to meet more Middle Eastern people or people of a different background, then they could be more open to learning about those people and not quite putting a perception on them that isn't true. So with my students, first day off the bat, I share a little bit about my history, about where my family comes from, the different language that I speak, and I just demonstrate little things like that to them, because for most of these kids, I'm the first Arab person that they actually get to interact with. It's responsibility of the teachers and the adults in these young children's lives to bring to light the different cultures that are around them, because we live in a country where it's not just one image of what an American is. There's so many different people here that it's important to showcase where all those people are coming from and the life experiences that they have. So I do think it's important for teachers to do that. And even if you don't come from that background, there are many resources that you can use to showcase those life experiences. For instance, I'm not Hispanic, I'm not from a Hispanic country, but I do have students who have that background. So it's important for me to connect with them and to understand their background. And not every one of my students is Hispanic, so I have students from other cultures, but we usually start off talking about that culture because it's the majority. It's not an easy task to truly learn the experience of the Middle East, but through literature we can learn to appreciate the Middle Eastern experience. I have learned with my own students how important stories are to share the lives and upbringings that other people experience. I have shared my own personal story with my students, and always listen intently as they share their own with me. Because I'm Middle Eastern, I find it extremely important that my heritage is represented and shared with these young children. I might be the only Arab that they've ever interacted with up until this point, but that doesn't mean their interactions with Middle Easterners end here. That's where the literature comes in. Teachers that don't necessarily come from a Middle Eastern background can use literature to introduce the culture and experiences to their students. Here's a few options that you can use with your own students. We're Sailing Down the Nile is a great read for young students in the pre-K and kinder age range. It briefly describes Egyptian geography and culture using vibrant images of the landscape. Oranges in No Man's Land is a story about a young girl in Lebanon who travels through hostile territory to get medicine for her dying grandmother. This read is targeted towards middle school students, but can be adapted for 5th graders and 6th graders. The Librarian of Barsa is an Iraqi wartime story about a librarian that puts matters into her own hands when trying to protect the books from being destroyed. This is based on a true story and depicts her tale of protecting 70% of 30,000 books filled with history and knowledge. It's a great read for elementary students. The Butterman is another great story for young students about a Moroccan family living through a time of famine in their country. It is told during the element of their father cooking dinner at the table. The Boy in the Wall is such a beautiful story about a young boy living in Palestine with his mother and their imaginings of a better life beyond the wall. Additionally, all of the artwork is illustrated by children in a Palestinian refugee camp. A Kid's Guide to Arab American History is definitely one of my favorites. Each chapter focuses on a different group of Arab Americans, including those of Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Jordanian, Egyptian, Iraqi, and Yemeni descent, and features more than 50 fun activities that highlight their distinct arts, games, clothing, and food. For teachers, cultural photography can help bring the world into your classroom and can spark curiosity and dialogue. Students like photographs. They're visual, engaging, and open-ended. The students can work together to share what they notice in the photographs and build upon each other's depictions. When using photography, it is important to focus on the details. So do your research and look into important traditions in that culture. For instance, as a Muslim, I celebrate Eid. Important symbols for this holiday include a crescent moon and a star, which represent the religion of Islam. Additionally, if you have any Middle Eastern students, I would ask them to bring in images and artifacts to share with the class. This resource was created by the University of Chicago to provide teachers with a reliable resource that builds understanding of Middle Eastern history and culture. It's targeted primarily towards high school students, but it's a great resource for teachers to gain some understanding about the Middle East and its history. You'll need to start by educating yourself so that you can educate your students. All good teaching begins with a respect for children, their innate curiosity, and their capacity to learn. Curriculum should be rooted in children's needs and experiences. No matter what we're teaching, ultimately the class has to be about our students' lives as well about a particular subject. Students should be thinking about the ways their lives are connected to the broader society. Thank you for spending a few minutes of your day watching this video. I hope it helps you out with your students and the inclusion of Middle Eastern culture in your classroom. I'd like to thank my sister and my cousin for helping out with today's production, and links to the different resources that I've described in the video can be found in the link below. Thank you. Goodbye.